Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Welcome to our June webinar. We're going to be having some presentations from our high school task force. So this was a new program that just started this year we're very excited about. We're gonna, over the webinar today, we're gonna go over a little background on what the task force is or was. And then we've got three of our task force members presenting for us today. And then, like I said, we'll have some discussion and Q&A time after that, followed by some general statewide announcements. So I'm gonna pass this off to Julia. She's gonna give us a little bit of background on this program.
I'm actually going to kick it off and then I'll pass it to Julia to talk about more of like the nuts and bolts of the task force.
Perfect.
So I'll just, yeah, kind of talk like big picture, like why the technical assistance team for the Oregon Safe Routes to School program decided to embark on this task force journey. It was about a year or so ago, a little more than a year ago, that we kind of got the idea for this and got the funding for it. And so it's been a while in the making. And so it's pretty exciting to now be at the point of actually like debriefing it, getting feedback from students that participated, and figuring out what's next. So a little bit about, yeah, what is this high school task force? So it really came from an opportunity that we saw based on many of you know, and many of you have been working with this too, that that Safe Routes to School grant funding was widened to be able to be used for all students grades K through 12. So given that a lot of our programs are geared toward elementary schools, it gave us a chance to step back and look at how our existing programs could be adapted to older students, or just kind of like what's needed from what needs and opportunities exist with the high school age group. So the task force really was one piece of the larger puzzle of this high school Safe Routes pilot program. So we had several other programs, two statewide competitions, a travel options pilot that rolled out at 2 schools, and technical assistance for high school groups. So each of those has their own, like we could do a whole webinar on each of those programs and what we learned and everything. Julia will tell you more, but we will be sharing about all of the high school programs and our takeaways at the July 8th quarterly meeting. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, the task force really was a central part of this larger pilot because they were able to provide input, kind of be representatives in their communities for things like the statewide competitions, as well as provide feedback and guidance as we simultaneously rolled out other pieces of the pilot. And then the last thing I'll say is on this is that it was a cool opportunity to learn from existing organizations that are already working with high school youth. So in figuring out like our approach to this task force and how like what is the facilitation going to look like? What is the structure going to look like? What do we need from this group? We got a lot of information and best practices from organizations working with high schoolers already. So not even necessarily in the realm of transportation, but we interviewed 10 organizations that work with this age group to just kind of pick their brain on what's worked, what hasn't worked, what are high schoolers like drawn toward and interested in, and used a lot of that feedback to guide the structure of this group. Okay, next slide. So in terms of the purpose of this group, there's several different aspects. So the first one being that we relied on this group to help provide direction for the high school safe routes in Oregon. So these students voted on the statewide competitions. They participated in a focus group to like provide their thoughts and feedback on traveling to school, what would help them and their peers be more likely to choose walking and biking as a way of getting to school. And yeah, and provided some input around the technical assistance we were offering and how we were going about that. Another purpose of this group was just building community around transportation for youth and inspiring a sense of change making and leadership in their communities. So you'll learn shortly that each of the students did an individual project in their communities. So there was sort of this balance of the leadership development and the change making and the community projects while also balancing the kind of development of a statewide high school program. And yeah, as I mentioned, we did a focus group to understand more about transportation challenges for this age group. We'll share more in the quarterly meeting about what we learned from that conversation and how it will inform the next steps of the high school program. And then lastly, it was important that these students were representatives and advocates for safe routes and for active transportation in their communities. So Julia will explain a bit more, but they were spread out across the state. So it was really, yeah, important to have that geographic representation. And a big part of the purpose was representing as many parts of the state as possible and yeah, having teen advocates and spread wide. So I think I'll pass it to Julia to talk more about, oh yeah, I'll also say I didn't really do too much in the nitty gritty. Julia and Karen Bosshart are really the ones who were in the weeds, like facilitating these meetings, selecting the students, and figuring out like the nuts and bolts of what we're offering and how we're offering it. So yeah, I'm gonna let Julia get into more of the specifics here.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. So I'm really excited to walk you through kind of what the task force looked like in practice. So we started with a statewide call for applications, and we ended up reaching out to a lot of different clubs and student groups, and also schools that were magnet schools that might have more of a higher interest in safe routes to school work. And so we started contacting those teachers and getting the materials out to them so that they could try to invite students to join. And we received 14 thoughtful submissions for just 5 available spots. And the goal was to build a small, diverse, and motivated team of students that represented different regions and lived experiences across Oregon. So the students that we ended up selecting were Sion, an 11th grader from Beaverton, Clarence, a 10th grader from Corvallis, Nicole, an 11th grader from Hillsborough, Enzo, a 9th grader from Troutdale, and Leaf, an 11th grader from Bend. And they all brought such different strengths, from like community organizing and advocacy to route mapping and creative outreach. And the range of interests and skills really helped shape the experience for everyone involved. And next slide. So the task force met monthly over Zoom, and each session followed a consistent structure. We began with our connection kickoff for some community building time. And that was a chance for students to really like connect with each other, get to know one another, and kind of build some trust. And then that was followed up by our knowledge exchange, which is kind of a learning segment where students explored safety concepts and different active transportation issues, planning tools, and they even got to learn from a panel of speakers that are professionals in the industry. And then we closed with our action lab, which is like a hands-on segment. And this time was for students to like really do something meaningful. And that included things like completing surveys, brainstorming outreach ideas, and reflecting on the barriers within their communities. And between meetings, we also sent out resources and offered check-ins, but the experience was really student-led. So that flexibility was really important. And I think it allowed students to take the lead and manage their own time and kind of shape their project in a way that fit their life and community context. And next slide. So what did we learn? We learned a lot. I think the biggest takeaways for me, the first one is just to trust students with real responsibility. They're already doing the work, and we don't need to hold their hand. We need to just make space. High schoolers are also really not that hard to reach. They're thoughtful and motivated and deeply aware of community issues, especially around equity and access. And we really just need to find the right venue for introducing our work, and they do the rest. And also when we center relevance and autonomy, students rise to it. So every one of them made a meaningful impact in their community, and they did it on their own terms, which was really important. And also, I think this was my biggest takeaway, was that youth voice is not just nice to have. It's a critical part of building transportation systems that actually work for students. And so, yeah, the biggest shift for me was personally just seeing how easily we overlook high school students as partners. This task force reminded me that they're not just the future of active transportation, they're already shaping it. And so if you want to dive deeper into what we learned, I hope you can join us for the Safe Routes to School quarterly meeting on July 8th, where we're going to be sharing more reflections on this project and continuing the conversation about youth leadership. But for now, the part I'm most excited about is hearing directly from the students who made this task force such a success. And so we're honored to introduce 3 of our task force members who stepped up. And I'm hoping all of them are here today, but we've got, we're going to start off with Sion, who's an 11th grader from Beaverton, and she brings a powerful voice for change and a deep understanding for her community's needs. And after she speaks, we will hear from Clarence Fernando, who's a 10th grader from Corvallis, and he will offer his thoughtful insight and deep personal understanding of the importance of active transportation and the way it shapes our communities. So with that, I will let Sion take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Let me get started. Okay. Let's see. It says I can't start screen share.
I've got your slides up. So if you want to just let me know when to change the slides for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so hello, everyone. My name is Sion Ermias. I'm a rising senior, and my project was revolved around ISB, which is a school in Beaverton, and it was regarding student transportation and safety surveys. You guys can go now. Okay, so this is my project overview. So I aim to understand how students at the International School of Beaverton commute to school and how safe they feel, particularly regarding road safety and visibility. So I conducted a survey which received 21 responses to gather anonymous feedback from students about their commuting experiences. The results were shared with my school community through an Instagram post on the official ISB account, and then I included the original QR code in that post so students can so I can get new student experiences. And then the results were also displayed on my school's bulletin board. And although my goal for this year was to actually do a different type of project, but that was to give out like reflective gear to students, I decided to make my first year's goal to just focus on raising awareness. And then next year will be the initiative to distribute reflective gear in partnership with the National Honor Society Season of Caring Committee. Next. So here's some photographs showcasing my project within the school. So this right here is the bulletin board, and I just like printed out the post that I originally made, and then I just put it on there. And then to our right, we actually have the results from my form. And from the 21 responses, the 2 main questions that I put were how safe do you feel when you go to when you walk or bike to school? And majority people said very safe. So that's when I kind of felt like the results weren't generalizable, because I've had my own experience walking to school. So that was the first thing. And I definitely want to go share this form to more students in my grade, because majority of the people who filled out the form were like middle schoolers. So I want to have more diverse perspectives. And then the second question that I was really focusing on is, do you wear reflective gear? And majority of people said no. So I added some like guiding questions to see how and why students do this, like don't wear reflective gear, and what's one way the students themselves can contribute to making a safer environment for students who walk to school. So that's definitely something I got out of this. Next. And so the stakeholders and strategies. So the key stakeholders were my mentors, Leah Beato. I've worked with her before in 8th grade for another project, but it was still related to walking to school and safe transportation. So she definitely helped me gather my thoughts and my ideas regarding my project and find something that can fit within my time constraint. And also Nora Stolting definitely provided my mentorship, because she provided me with resources such as grants, funding leads, and just overall guidance on sourcing reflective gear. And this was really helpful for me to get opportunities such as a Metro ROTC small grants program. And also, because of this, I was able to engage more with the ISB student body through the survey and direct surveys, through the social media and the direct surveys, because people were interested in the fact that I was going to be providing reflective gear later on in the year. So, yeah. Next. Yes. So, the effectiveness and impact. So I think the strategy of combining social media and then the student-led data was really effective in raising awareness, because having that anonymous student perspective helped validate the issue and encourage peer conversations around safety. And a lot of my peers did go up to me with questions regarding safe transportation to school and how I was able to get my voice out. So that was really helpful, because I do want to share my voice and the way I've been able to do this. So it was really nice to see that people cared. And this feedback not only supported the need for reflective gear, but also set the stage for the next phase of my project. Next. And so, yeah, as I said, so the students' responses were definitely positive, and they expressed a lot of appreciation for my opportunity to share the experiences and reflect back to my community. And from the form itself, and just in general, through conversation, majority students were telling me that they didn't think about visibility until now. So I'm just really glad that the project was successfully able to raise some awareness for next year's efforts, so that it can be more impactful. And so, yeah, the main takeaways is, through this project, I learned the importance of community engagement, strategic communication, and collaboration. I saw how data-driven advocacy can lead to tangible outcomes, especially when it's grounded in student voice. These lessons will continue to guide me in future initiatives focused on youth empowerment and public safety. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we'll save questions for the end. So I think we're gonna go straight into Clarence's presentation, which is right here.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Clarence Fernando. I go to Crescent Valley High School, and that's in Corvallis, Oregon. So I'm excited to share my project. So for a quick overview, the first part of my project was a presentation to green teams across my school district. And so basically, I went during their meetings and talked a little bit using Google Slides about walking and biking and investing in safe transportation infrastructure. And basically, the goal was to connect active transportation to environmentalism, which I assumed was most of what the green teams were focusing on. And so I wanted to have them start thinking about how active transportation fits into the environment. And so basically, I just visited different schools and talked about city design and its impact on the environment. And then for the second part, I also conducted a transportation survey with in my local high school, Crescent Valley. And basically the goal was just to gather data about transportation habits and student concerns about transportation infrastructure surrounding our school. And so here are some stakeholders that I got to interact with through this project. So the first one was Kathy Fesser, who was our Safe Routes to School coordinator at our district. And then literally right in the middle of my project, she left her job. And so I kind of had to pivot, trying to figure out who I can work with the project. And so I decided to contact Kim Patton, who is the director of operations. And so I talked with her, and eventually I set up a Google Meet with her where I explained the project to her and I met with her. And through that, she invited me to a like quarterly Green Teams meeting where all the Green Teams teacher advisors met at the district to talk about what their Green Teams are doing. And she told me to come there and present their project. And so there I met our new sustainability coordinator, Sky, and I worked with him a little bit to figure out the details of the project. And then there are a lot of other people I met. Lindsay Huber helped me, directed me to some goodies from ODOT to help give out during my presentation. I connected with different teachers across the district to try to get set up a good time to present at their schools. And then Cassie Minette, who's our bike ed coordinator, and Christina Stone, who's our leadership teacher at my high school for the survey. And so basically the presentation, so that picture on the bottom right is completely AI generated. I couldn't get an actual picture of me presenting because, of the laws on photo release laws and all that. So I decided to just do an AI generated picture, and this is basically how it looked like. But I got to present at Crescent Valley High School, Franklin Middle School, and Bessie Coleman Elementary School. The reason I couldn't present at most of the other schools, which I really wanted to, was they informed me that their green teams didn't really meet regularly. And so there wasn't a good opportunity for me to present. But definitely I'll be connecting with these schools next year to see if I can come in. And I also did share the Google Slides with all the green team teacher leaders. So they have access to the presentation if they ever want to just go through it themselves, which I think it's really cool. And there was a huge focus on interacting with the audience. And so the impact of the presentation, I felt that definitely everyone in the room learned at least something about active transportation and city design and how it fits with the environment. And then definitely, especially in the elementary school and middle school, students seemed to be very engaged and had a lot of fun. And then in the middle school, after the presentation, one student came up to me and told me that they were interested in the transportation field after hearing my presentation. And this is something they've been always looking for. And so that made me really excited. And I'm sure everyone left with a greater understanding and perspective about active transportation. And even me, after giving the presentation, as I drove around my city, I started seeing city design and car infrastructure in a new way. And I really enjoyed getting connected to the Safe Routes to School community locally and at the state level through this project. And so the second part of my project was a survey, and this was actually really last minute. I decided to just do this at the end of the school year on basically the last week of my high school. And so I sent the survey out on Wednesday, and Monday was the last day. So people had 5 days to fill it out. But I was really excited that I got 33 responses. And on the bottom right was the advertisement infographic that I used to advertise the survey. And I decided to use it, advertise it through C Club, which is our high school's green team, because I think that would get more engagement for people to take the survey rather than this dude named Clarence Fernando asking you to take this survey. I think with C Club, it gives more credibility. And so that's the one reason I decided to just stick with C Club. And so how I advertise it, well, I got it on the morning announcement slides where people could use the tiny URL or scan the QR code to fill the survey out, and I worked with the office manager at my high school to have it emailed everyone in the high school. And basically the goal was to use data and student feedback to identify infrastructure problems and safety concerns with the hope of using it to start the conversation with our district and school administrators on how we can resolve some of these issues regarding transportation infrastructure at my high school. And so, yeah, next slide. So this is a quick context of Crescent Valley High School. On the left, the red dot is where our high school is, and all like on the bottom, this is a Google Maps screenshot, is where our city is. So our high school is definitely in a more rural area. It's not in an urban area. And so if you have to walk or bike to school, you have to basically, it's a far walk or bike. And the picture on the right is, I don't know if you can tell, but in the high school, there's a road that basically connects it to the rest of the city. And this is the road. The picture of the road is on the bottom right. And as you can see, it's not the best for walking and biking. I think it literally looks like a forest. But all the cars, everyone who has to go to the high school from the south, from the city, has to drive up this road. And most, because of the condition, the lack of safe walking, active transportation infrastructure, most people usually commute by car, and also the distance too, because I don't think students really want to walk in that with cars zooming past. So I was just curious to see what people would say through this survey I gathered. And so here are some responses I got. So I started with a question on safety concerns for commuting to our high school, and we got many people talking about potholes in our parking lot, speeding cars, which I think our road has a, I'm not sure, 35, 45 speed limit, but I think most people, based on my observations, usually go 10, 15 miles an hour above the speed limit. I mean, if you see the road right there, it's meant for fast cars driving. And so it's not really, and without a sidewalk, which was one of the responses of safety concerns, it's not really that safe to walk and bike. And there are students who actually do walk to school. Like as I'm driving home, I always see a line of students walking on the bike lane, and it just doesn't feel really safe. But it was just good to have some data because, you know, if I'm going to talk with the district administrators on some of these problems, they probably would want actual data instead of my observations. So I think this was great. And you can see these are other questions I asked. Many people said that what could be done to make it safer to commute to our high school. Almost half of the responses talked about adding a sidewalk or a multi-use path next to the road. And there are a lot of barriers that people talked about to active transportation. Next slide. And then this was more data. I asked the question, how safe was it to commute to our high school? This is just driving, walking, biking. And people gave it a 3.12 out of 5. And so that's not the best, but definitely shows a lot of room for improvements. Most people had a under 15-minute commute, but there was a significant population of our student body who had pretty long commute. This could be distance or because they're riding the school bus. And on the left, you can see I asked some people, why do you not take public transit? Because we have a school bus and we have a city bus that is completely free and does go to our high school. And so these are some of the reasons. And what surprised me was only 19% of respondents said that the bus doesn't stop close to my house, meaning most people do have access to public transit, but they're just choosing not to for the reasons above. And next slide. And here's like a quick last response summary. 66.7% of respondents indicated that they usually drive to and from a school, but only 33.3% walk or bike or take transit. And in fact, most of the responses here are from freshmen. I think 22 out of the 33 responses were freshmen, and generally, yeah, underclassmen, freshmen usually take the school bus, which was evident in some of the answers they gave. But what was really interesting was I asked the question, if many of these concerns were solved or fixed, how many of you would consider walking or biking or taking transit? And that number rose to half. So it's pretty cool to think that if these problems were solved, half of our student body might walk or bike to school. Obviously, it's a small sampling of the population of our school, but it's pretty interesting to see that people would change how they commute to school if many of these problems were solved. And yeah, and it's a really cool quote. This is on the bottom left. This is a response someone gave. This is a quote. They said that if you want people to walk or bike, actually have infrastructure that encourages it. So I thought that was pretty cool that people were aware on some of the problems of figuring out bike and walking infrastructure. Next slide. And so the future plan, which I kind of hinted, is continue working with C Club, our student government, working with district administrators to address the many concerns. And we're definitely going to conduct a follow-up survey, trying to get a wider sample with more students to ensure the accuracy of the data. Next slide. And this was actually a bonus project that I did not plan to happen, but Franklin K28, which I was one of the schools I presented to, the Green Team's leader informed me that their Green Club is working on trying to get buses back to Franklin. And she invited me to help come work with them to help convince the district to restart busing. There used to be buses to the school before COVID, but after COVID, apparently they decided not to continue busing into Franklin. And so they invited me to help figure that out. And so that's something I'll be working on next year with Franklin in the district. But next slide. That's basically it. And so thank you for listening. And I'm really excited to see where this project will go in the future. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be part of this task force. Thank you so much.
That was awesome. Thank you. That's so exciting that you got a bonus project out of it. I love that. I think Julia said that she's gonna go through the slides for Nicole. So let me reset that. Yeah, and if we just make sure we save a little time for questions, but I think that I'm excited to hear about this project too.
Yeah, and Nicole, so she's an 11th grader from Hillsborough, and she really took an equity lens with her project, which I thought was really interesting and cool. I'm not nearly as charming, but I will do my best to present her slides. Yeah, let's get those once those are up.
I might just, it looks like it's taking a while to load, so I might just put it like this if that's okay.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, so Nicole's project was about encouraging youth public transit use. So she did a big rollout rally at Glencoe High School in Hillsborough, where she attends. All right, next slide. So I'll share a little bit about the issue she was trying to address, the goals and the event that she created, and also just the results she came away with. So the issue that she was really focused on is that many high school students in the area don't take advantage of the public transportation options available to them, such as TriMet buses, the Max Light Rail, and active transportation like biking or walking. Whether due to lack of awareness, safety concerns, or accessibility barriers, this underuse limits student independence, contributes to traffic congestion, and increases reliance on car-based travel. Through this project, she aimed to highlight safer, more sustainable, and cost-effective transportation choices that are already available and help students feel more informed and confident using them. Next slide. So the goals and overviews as part of the Oregon Safe Routes to School High School Transportation Task Force, she organized a public transit awareness event called the Rollout Rally. The goal was to encourage high school students to explore the use of public transportation like TriMet buses, the MAX, and active options such as biking and walking, especially with summer approaching. So the event focused on an information table during lunch at Glencoe High School, which offered resources such as TriMet youth passes, maps, safety tips, and a QR code survey to gather data on how to improve the city to better reflect the needs and concerns of youth when it comes to navigating their community. By making transit options more visible and approachable, the project aimed to promote sustainable, affordable, and safe travel choices among teens to ultimately foster greater independence, reducing car traffic, encouraging healthier daily habits, and supporting a cleaner environment. And next slide. Thank you. So this was her event summary of her rollout rally. So she actually ended up getting 108 student responses, and she also got, I forget how many, but she got a big number of staff responses as well. And that was a really big turnout. And she said a lot of the reasons that she got so many responses, like at first she wasn't getting very many, so she went around to all of the teachers to see if they had leftover snacks at the end of the school year and collected all of them and then started giving those away. And then suddenly the responses started coming in. So I thought that was a really creative approach and low cost too, right? And yeah, so she ended up giving away 26 free TriMet passes, 6 maps, 4 informational pamphlets, and 113 students were spoken to about public transportation and active transportation. So great metrics. Next slide. So this was her table. So she displayed the TriMet passes as well as snacks for the students. And you can see on her slide there, I don't know how visible it is to everybody, but there's, she also made a handmade Safe Routes to School sign, which I thought was so cool. Yeah, just very creative and informative approach. Next slide. So this was some of the information that she shared out, which I like also that she really approached it looking at like what's coming up for students summer break and how to engage with them on their travel choices in that area. So she had one pamphlet about Oregon safe routes for the summer. And then she also had another one on just safety first. So how to stay visible while traveling and how to make sure that you're staying safe while you're doing it. Next slide. So she also did a lot of informing students just about best practices for the environment when thinking about transportation. So kind of showing the visible impact of reducing cars down to just people riding on a bus, for instance. And also she talked about etiquette and street smarts, which is a really important issue for teenage students and a really good angle to take to make it really relevant for them. Next slide. And her survey highlights, oh, I'm going to have a hard time reading, but I know the biggest issue was distracted drivers for students in her area. And I think most of the students drive at Glencoe High School, but they have a pretty large chunk of bus riders. So, so that's a really big positive for them. And next slide.
Try clicking present and see what happens from the survey slide. Oh, okay. Sorry, maybe that was a bad suggestion. You can keep going. It just would have been cool to see the survey responses.
I'll make sure to send the slides out so we can all look at them after too.
And her next steps, she's going to revisit her survey and edit it to get more correlational data, which I thought was just so spot on. She's going to have more resources to give out for next time. And she's also going to replicate these rollout rallies throughout the Hillsborough School District. And that kind of highlights one of the really cool things about the task force is that so many of the students are continuing their work. They, this kind of launched them off, but they really don't need all of our support. They're really running with this, which is just very special. And next slide, I think that's it for her. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna stop sharing for now and try to figure out the slideshow again, but does anyone have any questions about any of these really cool projects for or questions about the task force in general?
I have a question. Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, Clarence. I'm Michelle, and my daughter attended Crescent Valley High School, so I'm very familiar with the area. And I was very intrigued, of course, by your presentation because I have firsthand knowledge of the area, and new to a role at Ben Lapine Schools. That one of the things that I'll be working on is helping have conversations within our school system about where we locate schools, because it can make a big difference on whether or not people can have access to be able to use active transportation to get places, right? Including school. Do you have any insights for me that I could potentially use from your perspective as a student and a task force member that I could share with my colleagues at Ben Lapine Schools when we're talking about where we locate schools to help support active transportation?
Yeah, so I mean, obvious answers, just make sure that I mean, so we think about schools, each of the schools have like the geographic boundaries set by the district. And so when thinking about how it fits with the boundaries set by the district, you might maybe want to consider like the infrastructure. Obviously, that's the obvious answer. How do bike lanes, is there like adequate access to bike lanes and sidewalks to the school? I think it's also important to consider the area where the school is located in, because ultimately, if like the school is located in an area where there's not a lot of good active transportation infrastructures like sidewalks or bike lanes, wherever you built the school, I think people ultimately are not going to choose to walk and bike to school, because it's like you have to think about it as like there's like a network of walking and biking. And so it's important to see like where most students are living, where they would go to the school, and think about like what routes they would use to commute to the school if they were to choose active transportation, and if there's adequate infrastructure to support their choices to use active transportation to ensure that it's safe to do so. And I think that's like the biggest thing for most high school students, is that they would do it. The biggest thing I would say is distance. They would not want to walk or bike to school if it's really long. But I think most high school students are really open to the idea of walking and biking to school. But I think the biggest concern is safety, and if they have the adequate infrastructure to get to the high school.
Thank you.
And Clarence, I think one thing that's really neat about your perspective, I think, is that you also have background just seeing what it can look like when infrastructure is really designed with active transportation in mind. Do you want to share a little bit about your personal background?
Oh, sure. So, I grew up in Singapore, for like the first 10 years of my life. And Singapore is a very dense city country. I think most people walk or bike and take public transit to places. I would say like only 13% of people owns a car in Singapore. And so walking, biking, and taking public transportation is basically the norm everywhere. And I took public transit to my elementary school in Singapore, and it was really nice to have the infrastructure. In fact, the route to walk to my elementary school had covered walkways. So the sidewalk was covered with shelters because it rained a lot in Singapore because it's in the tropical area. And I think most students also walked and biked to school. And so I think that's really important. And I've seen that through traveling to different cities and here in Corvallis and going to other cities around the country to see the different levels of walking and biking infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think about generally the city of Corvallis has a really great bicycle and pedestrian network that just doesn't really exist for that more rural environment of Crescent Valley. So it's really an interesting study in contrast for the city of Corvallis, you know.
I'd be interested to know from the high schoolers just something that you learned that you didn't know already from working on these projects. It's so cool how you guys are so young and getting interested in this. Like I feel like I had no concept or understanding of what active transportation meant as a kid, and so I want to hear a little bit more about yeah, something really cool that you learned during doing your projects.
And before you guys answer, I just also wanted to let everyone know that Nicole is here, so she can answer any questions about her project as well. So that's fantastic.
For me particularly, I guess hearing that multiple students in my community and in my school district and in my school itself have the same pressing concerns as me regarding the safe pathways to school. My school is really small, so our community is like tightly connected with each other. So I just didn't know that we were all having this same concern for our safety, especially when we walk to school. I always walk to school, so seeing that some other students who don't walk to school but see their peers walk to school have the concern for them is just really interesting. And I'm glad that another group of students were able to work and try to talk with me regarding my project. So, yeah.
For me, I think one thing I learned was through my presentation with the green teams, I was really surprised by how knowledgeable some of the students were on active transportation in our city. One of the questions I asked students was, what are like some public transit options in Corvallis? And well, one of them shouted our city bus service, Corvallis Transit System. Then another student talked a bit about Oregon State's Beaver Bus. And then another student talked about BAT, which is Benton Area Transit, which I did not expect them to know, but Benton Area Transit is basically a bus service that provides like wheelchair accessible transportation to seniors. And I was really surprised that some of these students knew about that. And so that was one thing that really surprised me on how knowledgeable students were about the options in our community in active transportation.
Nicole, do you want to share something that you learned while doing your project?
Yeah, with my project, it was a lot just of coordination with my school district, which I think it was really exciting because our school district, at least personally, isn't really open with working with youth very often. So this is a very new thing that I've been working on. So just learning how to communicate with people. But something that surprised me about my student body that I was showcasing to was kind of the opposite of what Clarence said. There isn't a big like knowledge of our public transportation. Like we know it's there, but it isn't widely used. And so I think it was kind of eye-opening for the students I talked to about just like how like well it could like how good it is for our community to have these options, right? It's always there, but it's not really taken into account how much better it is, how it can clear up streets and like it's better for our planet. One of my posters that I had printed out during my presentation or like on my table was one that just showcased the differences between using car for travel versus using things like the mats or buses and how it can really clear up our streets and how much better that is regarding like greenhouse emissions and things like that and pollutants. And so I think it's just not talked about enough among my community and in like high schools in my area. So a lot of students were actually pretty curious about that. That's like one of the few like posters, like the first things that they would point out was like, that's kind of cool. Like I did not know that, like that's crazy. So I think just regarding transportation use of active and public transportation, I think it's really important moving forward that we continue educating my community on the benefits that come with it.
Thank you. Oh, Michelle, did you have another question?
I do, but I don't want to jump in if other people have a question. I mean, I do have one more.
Go for it.
Okay. Okay. So I'll go back to Corvallis because I'm really excited, Clarence, that you were representing Corvallis on this task force because I used to be the transit manager for the city of Corvallis and also did the transportation and parking at Oregon State and the Benton County. So I know firsthand about building because that was a big body of my work in my past. So I was so excited to hear you talking about how people knew about it in Corvallis. And so, I mean, I get that you and the Corvallis area get that, okay? And so I would really like to hear some perspective from all three of you about how to approach it in my community, my Central Oregon community, where it's not that top of mind here, and we're trying to create that top of mind awareness about active transportation and also even, so give me some perspective about bringing that to Central Oregon and then also about the possibility of starting a kind of like a peer program in the high schools, or in the secondary schools. I mean, because you guys are high schoolers, right? And we're developing our Safe Routes to School program here. And at some point, we want to maybe get an ambassador or peer group going of high schoolers to get more people encouraged. So I'm open to any additional insights that I can hear from you as high schoolers. So this question really is for Clarence and Nicole. And I apologize. Actually, for all three of you, and anybody who's willing to give me some insights about approaching it with high schoolers in an area that doesn't have a lot of top of mind awareness yet about public transit and active transportation. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't really know about like the just climate of transportation over there. Like, could you maybe give us a little bit more insight on like Central Oregon? Like, do you guys have a lot of it or kind of lacking public transportation? I would just like to know a little bit more on that.
I would say the public transit system here is still basic. I mean, it's there, but the service hours and days are not as robust as I think it would need to be for people to really use it. Because Corvallis is a much smaller community population-wise than Bend, but it has a much more robust transit program, for example. So how do we approach people and especially secondary students in an area that, that's still developing? How do we frame our narrative about that?
Yeah, I'd say with secondary students, it's really about having more like in face, like right, like being at schools, giving presentations. I think would be like we always, at least in my school district, we have periods of access times, which are free periods in between our classes, in which we sometimes have presentations happened. Having assemblies, I think always like those are kind of required, so they have increased participation. And during those assemblies, you can have just give like students like more input and information about public transportation in the area. I know we do a lot of like bike rodeos with elementaries, but with high schoolers often do ride bikes, at least in my area. They do like riding bikes and sometimes they want the option, but because, bike rodeos are kind of like for kids, they're centered around elementary schools, but having something similar to high schoolers would not be a bad idea. I would be super open to going to a similar styled event in which I can get my bike repaired or get it like fixed or like learn some stuff about how to get bikes fixed, where I can go to get a new bike and things like that. That can encourage use of active transportation or public transportation. I think it's just increasing awareness through like kind of like little like campaigns, like through like events during school hours. Students are really about like having opportunities to get together, right? Adolescents, we're all about hanging out with friends. So for making a sort of event or being part of like a farmer's market, in which students are just walking around, talking around, and can come up to tables really works. With mine, I set up during our lunch times to talk about public transportation and active transportation. So incentives with high schoolers also are a big thing. I used a lot of snacks. I used free TriMet passes, which is something that our public transportation system gives out to youth, which are just summer long free passes to be using public transportation. So having those out on the table is just a great way to get students. And then honestly, just like being there to talk about it in person. Often, I think it's just, yeah, having that physical interaction with students. Sometimes we do get things, like I said, during our access periods, during those free periods, like slideshows and stuff. But if there's not really a person there talking about it, it rarely gets ignored. And like online campaigns really do get ignored. So I don't feel like often like organizations will take social media as a first approach to connect with students. But I feel like truly the best way is physical interactions and not just online, because online you can just scroll past it. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for those recommendations. I want to be cognizant of the fact that it is 12:01. But thank you all so much for all of the work you did on the task force, and for coming and presenting after school's out. That's very generous of you with your summertime. So we really appreciate it. And thanks to Julia and Karen for helping put this task force together and doing such a great job with it. I will be sending out a follow-up email that'll include these slides. It'll include Clarence's presentation and then also some announcements that we didn't get to today. So thank you all for being here, and we will not have a webinar next month, but we will see you in August. So thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you
Great
so much.
job.
Have a great day.
Thank you.